Hey guys, welcome back. Sebastian here. So today I want to talk about an important subject, and that is the meaning of important. As I watch a lot of videos, there's always important messages and important things that we need to realize, important things we need to discuss, important things we need to do. But what does this word importance actually mean? So I started digging in and we'll go through what I have uncovered to kind of clarify what this word means in my own mind and how I apply it. And maybe there are better words to use in a lot of situations than just to say it's important. So to begin with, let's look at the root word, and it comes from Latin importare, I think. That means to bring in, to carry into, to be brought into significance, or that it carries a certain sort of weight in a situation. So importance, important, it's importing. We are bringing a particular concept into our consciousness. We're importing it to our consciousness and bringing it into our awareness, and now acting on it and assigning a certain value or weight to whatever it is that we are labeling or assigning a level of importance. So I bring it into my field of meaning. I give it weight within the current framework of my experience. So it has this subjectivity to it. It arises within the relationships that we perceive. It's usually tied to goals, to values, to fears, to processes, to our perceived identity. It's like a mirror of our identification with our circumstances. Each thing, each importance, anything that we consider important, it's pointing to what our ego self is concerned with, or orbiting around, or paying attention to. We use this gradient of importance to give structure and coherence to our individual experience. It's not that it's important to anyone and everyone. It's really anything that is assigned importance is done so at the individual level. Although there may be this macro importance to what we are assigning important, but that's not always the case. Like a child's well-being is extremely important to the parent, but it's not so important to just the average person or any other child that may be engaging with this child. The well-being is its importance is associated to its relationship to its parent, or to its sibling, or to its family member, or to the general public in its vicinity. Data integrity is important to a scientist, but maybe not to the average Joe Blow worker. Inner stillness is important to a meditator, or to like a monk, or someone who is seeking clarity and more conscious awareness. But this concept may not even exist in much of the population. Inner stillness is not even on their radar. So why is that important? Is it important? So importance is acting like a filter. It's like a filter of attention. We're giving attention to those things that we find important. So importance is related to our attention, our awareness, and kind of where our energy is flowing. Inside our minds, we construct a hierarchy of attention. We're going to pay attention to one thing because in that moment, or in that period of time, it carries greater weight than, say, 10,000 other things. So our attention is on that. Say, we're hungry. Well, our attention is going to be on eating. It's important to eat. It's important to eliminate this hunger feeling. And so in that moment, cooking some food or finding some food or buying some food is going to be important. So what I want to do is look at the levels, how importance plays into our level of awareness. And it's pretty interesting how it evolves and almost kind of circles back on itself. A little bit of paradox is involved in this endeavor as well. So that's a little bit interesting. So like the first stage of what we would start assigning importance to in the stage of survival and fear. So fear of non-existence, fear of annihilation, fear of any number of things. But most of our basic fears come out of the need to survive, or the impulse to survive. In this level, like some synonyms to the word important would be vital, crucial, essential, critical, required, pressing, fundamental. Those are all kinds of like different perspectives on what importance means. Each one of them can overlap and kind of attach itself to other concepts, but they all kind of point at this general concept of importance. So anything that threatens or supports our survival we consider it important, either to avoid it or to attain it in some way. Importance is physical, it's psychological, it's social. So it has all these different flavors to it. So something that's important socially may not be so important to our physical person, but it may be much more tied to the psychological side of what we would assign importance. So survival is one of the most deeply encoded programs of biological priority. In this state of mind, importance is anything that is necessary for our safety, our security, which means we're avoiding any sort of danger, any inclination that would create harm or even disharmony. So it's pretty basic level. You can think of all kinds of things that would be in this survival situation: food, shelter, clothing. All of these things are important for our basic survival. The next level of that is our desires and our wants. These may not be important to survival, but they make survival easier or make survival more long-lasting than, say, just the moment or the very short period of time into the future. So if you look at food is important in the moment, but it's not going to last forever. It's not, a meal is only going to last a few hours. The food in my pantry may be only there for a few days. So what we have to do is look at, like, what are we trying to do, and what is important to get there. The survival needs remain important, but now that those have been met, we move into the desiring and the wanting, and those are still very rooted in the survival instinct, but now are extending our survival period into a longer time frame. That doesn't mean that everything we want or desire is going to be survival in nature, but that's where the wanting and the desire begins. I want more food in my pantry. How can I have more food in my pantry? Well, I want more food in my garden. I want my garden to be bigger. I want to grow specific things in my garden, or I want to be able to purchase more food to have on hand in storage as preparation for future events. This leads us into our levels of comfort and safety and security over a longer period of time rather than just in the immediate moment. And now we're good for a few days or a week or even maybe a month. And now that worry subsides and we can focus on some other thing that we find important that may not have been so important until this need was met. So we're going to think about money, success, pleasure, and even more. Like our wants and desires never end. So even as we go through these hierarchical kind of structures, the want and the desire is always in the base of where we're going now. Survival is the ultimate foundation, and then once we move into the wants and desires, we've already changed levels. We've moved up in our vibration or our resonance with what is in reality. If we prioritize some goal, each aspect of that goal becomes important to the goal itself, or the goal creates importance. There is this hierarchical attention model that we apply to whatever goal it is. And so there may be 10 things that get us to our goal. 2 of those things are really important, but there may be 4 or 5 that are pretty important, but they don't need near as much attention as the other 2. And then there may be a couple that are almost trivial, but do play a role. They are important in a way, but not as the initial 2 that are very important. So the desires that we have and the wants that we have are really pointing toward pleasure, toward satisfaction, and maybe even status. We're looking for a sense of happiness, a sense of joy, a sense of completion or completedness, that kind of thing. That's what we're seeking as we move through our goals. As we reach these levels, our brain produces dopamine, and that's like the initial reward. And so that initial reward, even though there may not be a major exterior award, our biological process of giving us dopamine is part of the instinctual nature of survival. This reward makes us move in that direction. It helps us. It gives us a reason to move in that direction. These desires and rewards that is almost what gives us our sense of purpose, moves us to act in this material world. This is where we kind of find our meaning. and maybe our meaning and our purpose is directly tied to dopamine, and we're just kind of addicted to dopamine. So meaning and purpose is really just a chemical process. Maybe. I don't know. But we choose what matters to our feelings, our security, our safety, what's going to provide us pleasure, and avoiding those things that cause us pain. Those are all kind of in this wanting and desiring stage of importance, like the emotional attachments and our conditioning, our programming. We inherit so much of what we individually think of as important. We inherit it first of all, we inherit it from our parents and any direct family member, siblings, things like that. But we inherit things from our friends, from our larger family, from our business associates and employees and employers, just from society in general, from government. All of these things emotionally imprint on us and shape the way we assign importance to particular things. There's so many things that can shape us besides the things that the ways we're imprinted, but in the way that we process any of these ideas and concepts, like any trauma that we might have in our early childhood years can greatly affect how we interpret the world. Our education, where we're educated, how we're educated, what religion was our family, and what were we kind of just brought up in and around, and how that shapes us. So this is like a learned importance more than it is something that we discover. It's something that is kind of pressed upon us from the outside. Even though it's a learned importance doesn't mean it's not important, but it also doesn't mean it is important. It's just we are predicting and interacting with the world as if these concepts are important, and that in and of itself shapes how we move through life. So something that we learned is important, maybe to our family or to our friends or to our culture, may have been advantageous, and now it is just kind of become habit that we do a certain thing or act a certain way, and it could be that it's actually limiting us now, even though it was important in the past. Maybe the level of consciousness of the group, of the tribe, of the society has now risen to a level to almost make this thing that was important and is still carrying a certain weight of importance. It's almost like that's not necessary anymore. And it's almost like it's holding us back. I see this primarily in religion and government. Those are probably the two most prominent societal structures that I feel were important and have become less and less and less important as our consciousness level increases. I think we are in a time period where it is now time for us to start deconstructing a lot of these social structures and rebuilding them in a way that moves us more into conscious awareness and takes our focus away from this survival instinct that may be holding us back. In our social roles, we're looking for consistency and a sense of cohesion. That's what the ego really likes, that structure. And so it's always trying to make sense of what's going on. And it does that by assigning importance, hierarchical grading of things. And this normalcy, this predictability, this consistency is important because it helps us integrate and function within a larger societal framework, which can get very complex. And depending on where you fall in that society will determine what you individually assign as important as your role, at how you show up. And then the ego uses that to build its identity. If in your role you become a teacher, teaching is important. Learning is important. Efficiency in that process is important. You're going to kind of just push away a lot of other things. You're not going to be so you're not going to be so worried how business is done in a local cafe. It doesn't matter to you. You're going to be more focused on your teaching, your supplies, your classroom, whatever it is. All of these things are going to gain a certain amount of importance within the structure of how you show up in life. That identity is where you find belonging and acceptance, inclusion. I think that love and compassion can kind of play into this level of awareness. You're doing something that you have found a certain amount of meaning. You you have built within yourself a certain responsibility to take on this role. In my opinion, that anything that someone finds important, there is a love aspect to it. That is what makes it important, is that it is pointing toward love and compassion, either for myself or for others or for both. It's important because it matters. It matters to me. It matters to others. It matters to both of us. So now this leads us into the deeper psychological understandings and psychological kind of thoughts around importance. So we label something as important when it maintains a certain predictability, some sense of safety, a level of control. We want to reduce any uncertainty that might be detectable or foreseeable. We like to stabilize our environment. This is what the ego craves, this predictability, this stable structure of perception. We manifest this in routines, in our beliefs, in our moral codes, attain material possessions to build a certain predictability in our life. We build structures and hierarchies to basically prevent or at least avoid what we would consider chaos in any way. But the control, this is where we begin to build our illusions, because control is an illusion, and it's not real. We still seek the control because it gives us that predictability. The predictability is the reward of building these control systems. By creating a control system, we are looking into the future, predicting what could happen, and then building or assigning importance to certain things to get to that point of predictability, of safety, of security, of peacefulness. And that allows us to relax a little bit, to find some peace, to not be in this survival mindset, even though that survival mindset may be still, it's operating in there, but we're not so consciously aware of it. We're not thinking about where our next meal is going to come from, because we've planned and we've controlled, and now we have food in the pantry, and maybe we even have food in the garden, and we have food in the freezer. And these are all these control mechanisms that we build to give us a certain amount of predictability in our food delivery, in our food intake, and its availability to a certain time in the future. But even then, it's still just temporary. You can't store enough food today to last you forever. Food has an expiration date. Some is going to expire very quickly, and some may last you for years if it's in cans. But you can't buy enough to feed you forever. So you get to a point where you're like, okay, I feel comfortable, safe, and secure with this amount of food in my pantry, because I know there's a grocery store down the street that I can always go to. We get to a point, and then we move on to the next thing that is important, and we feel that we should put our attention into and build more control, more security, more safety in that area of life. Maybe that's where a house comes in. So there's also in this is our social connections of bonding and belonging, even as children, but more as we age, we assign importance to things that strengthen and preserve our bonds with other people. In this area, we think about the approval of others, loyalty, our reputation within the community. We think about friendships and what they mean to us and what our friendship means to others. Love, intimacy, all of these things are kind of in this emotional space. And that's where we're leading into a deeper importance that almost kind of starts to negate these survival instincts, these things that are important for survival. Now that all of those needs have been met, all of those important things have been taken care of or are not in need of immediate attention, we move our attention and we shift our awareness of what is important to bigger and better things. So all of this stuff is born out of our need to identify within like a social framework. So that starts at family. Like even in your earliest years, your family and your friends, even your extended family, all of these people are the initial people that we want to bond with, that we need this approval from, and that we have some level of intimacy with. And then that moves into like work associates, people at church or within your religious circle. And then that can move into the bigger community, maybe even up into like city, how you're showing up as a citizen in a city or a state or a nation. What is your role in that? And then seeking more approval, more connection, more intimacy, more friendships. And this level of integration into the community is required to find purpose on those levels. So our worth is tied directly to the structure. It's mirroring back to us through those other people within that group that we belong, and we're mirroring back that they belong. And that's how the society comes together. That's how the community comes together, is each person mirroring back to each other that they belong. And it's because we are all kind of involved in something that everyone finds important. That is the cohesion structure. Once we've kind of, find a level of comfort in that level of awareness, we start moving into self-actualization and our purpose as individuals, our own drives and goals. And at this stage is when a lot of people kind of stagnate. Maybe they reach this level, but they don't go too far into it. They only reach it because it's just a natural evolution, but it's not something that they're actually looking to go deeper into. They're not seeking, they're just living. They're not being yet. They don't understand what a deeper level of being means and how that changes the way we show up in the world. Now we're going to start focusing on the becoming. We're leaning into being, but there's some levels that we have to process within to move deeper into this space. We find out, this is where we find out who we're meant to be. We find our life's purpose, what really gives us meaning. Maybe we were in a job and our reality was important. It had meaning and purpose, and it didn't fulfill us. It didn't make us feel like, oh, this is what I was meant to do. We're doing it. It's serving a purpose. We're receiving a reward for it, whether that be, monetary or some kind of social acceptance. It's not our calling. It's not our passion. It's not giving our life meaning. What we start to do is seek our own purpose and our own direction. And that requires us to dig a little deeper into what it is we find important. And we start leaving behind a lot of the inherited and conditioned importance. And maybe at that point, we also start seeing that a lot of things that we may have thought were important actually were not. This awareness leads us to a level of awakening, can create like an existential type concern. And I think that's why a lot of people reach this stage, but they don't dig too deep, because they can see just below the surface that a lot of things that they may find important would no longer be important if they start to dig too much deeper. And they're not ready for that. And I can understand that, because that's where we start getting into chaos and unpredictability and falling outside of what the ego has normalized. And so people will literally avoid that chaos, even though it is important to see it, to grow spiritually. So in this stage, we start seeing or seeking to express our true essence, live our individual potential. I think that this becomes much more very personal, because it is coming from inside us on a level that is that comes from our own experiences, our individual experiences. That's what gives it meaning. That's what gives it purpose, is our individual experiences, our perspective, what we have seen and heard and learned. And now we're going to apply our own energy into that realm to make it better, to add clarification, to help others, and even help ourselves. We're doing it for a sense of fulfillment, a sense of wholeness, not because we're obligated to do something. We want to do it. It's actually arising from within us, and then we push ourselves to engage in that activity. And then through this attention, we affirm our existence. We affirm our creative nature as creative beings. And then we allow our authentic self to unfold. Maybe we even begin to deconstruct the self as we mature into this. And this is where we really start getting into the meat of the ultimate levels of what is important, or at least as how I'm expressing it in this kind of discussion. We begin to move into selflessness. And that means that the things that the self classified as important start to fall away as the self falls away, as the ego diminishes in its ability to control our thoughts and our emotions and our wants and our needs and desires. This is when importance expresses itself or aligns itself with more universal truth, love, divine order, not because it benefits me, the individual. We're kind of transcending that self reference. We begin to recognize through our inner knowing rather than thinking about it and having thought forms around something. Anytime we're thinking, anytime a thought is involved, there's ego involved. It's almost impossible to separate those two. I would almost say it is impossible, but all things are possible, just maybe not very easy to attain. In this deconstruction, that's when we start finding that we are part of a bigger whole. We start seeing that everything is intertwined and everything is overlapping and shaping each other. Nothing that we experience happens in a vacuum. it doesn't happen in isolation. We start reconnecting to the source, to the one. We start recognizing the concept of non-duality. Even though we live and exist and act in this dualistic nature of reality, we can see that that is a layer of interpretation, but we can step outside of our self and see how that we are part of and connected to the one, the non-dual state. This reconnection is what gives us a greater sense of meaning, of coherence, a sense of service to the whole. And our service to the whole is flavored by all of those past experiences that got us here. But now we're not doing it for ourselves. We're doing it because it's good, it's right, it's love, it's compassion. So as I've described this hierarchy of attention, we see that importance evolves with our level of conscious awareness. Our basis of what we think is important increases and shifts upward as our awareness and our attention increases from survival and fear at the very beginning, and then desires, attachment, control, belonging, and then all of that leads us to our individual purpose and meaning, and then into the truth of reality, the greater purpose, the greater meaning outside of our individual purpose and meaning. And so things at that level that are important were not even on the radar in the beginning. But at that highest level, all of those other things helped get us there. This greater consciousness reduces the importance of survival, and it shifts the meaning to how we fit in to the bigger picture, how we matter to the whole, how we resonate with other beings and other aspects of creation. And at this level, importance becomes synonymous with reality, with truth, not in some mental construct of the mind, but is more just alignment with being itself. What I've realized in this inquiry into the word and the meaning of importance is that it's like a ladder that the mind must climb on its way to greater conscious awareness. At the top of this ladder is alignment with being, and every step moves us closer, and every step also becomes less important as we get higher on the ladder. Survival and being they're not separate, even though they may be really far apart in our growth within consciousness or conscious awareness. They are one and the same, in that the body has this instinctual drive to survive. This is just an innate expression of self-preservation. It's an expression of the same life that animates our world and our universe. It's an impulse to persist, experience life as life. Survival is important because being naturally protects and preserves its expression through form. And what creates this sort of paradoxical relationship is our ego identification with the mental thought forms and the constructs of the mind as we go along. Our ego mind is interpreting our instinct to survive as something like personal. My ego makes things about me, even though I don't have anything to do with it. The reason we do that is because that is just how the ego works. It makes us important. We're like, what do they call it? Main character syndrome. That is what the ego is an expression of main character syndrome. the egoic mind, it mistakes this impulse of being to express itself into my need to survive. The body mind says it acts to preserve the vessel, but the ego mind is saying, I must not die, which is very different than preserving the vessel. It's personal. I am not this vessel. This vessel, I inhabit this vessel. This starts to, dissolve the ego and allows us to move past that. So, is survival important? I mean, is it important for me to survive or for anyone to survive? Yes, it is important in the degree that we still identify with the temporary reality. Our temporary reality is what we experience. And all of the talk about afterlife and other realms, different levels of heaven, anything that is outside of our natural, normal, five sense awareness is all kind of outside this temporary nature. So alignment with beingness and truth is important because it reveals that survival is not the point of this manifest reality. It's only an aspect of it. And once we get past that level of survival, our mind expands, our awareness expands. We're able to move into more mental constructs of joy and love and peace and harmony and these kind of things. It's all born out of our ability to survive without a lot of struggle. Survival is just natural. It no longer becomes our pursuit. It is now just a function of awareness and presence that we must go through. So in this understanding, importance kind of just it all importance collapses into the perspective of the individual. And from the individual perspective, my life is important because it is how I experience love, meaning, purpose, how I grow and align with reality. But from beingness, from that standpoint, no single life is more important than the other. I am like a wave in the ocean. The ocean does not need me to be the ocean. From the human vantage point, importance is what it allows our being, the deeper conscious awareness, it allows it to focus and differentiate through this particular perspective. And our sense of how like this all matters to me is infinite, experiencing the finite with a sort of detail and specificity to this perspective. And that happens to you as well in your perspective. This illusion of personal importance, it gives rise to all the richness of human life, our stories, our art, our devotions, and our evolution in any number of ways. So while the ego's assignment of importance is relative, it's not wrong. It really is relative to the individual life. Each of our individual lives is not important cosmically, but it is cosmically intimate. We are a product of and directly tied into and giving meaning to this reality, this physical reality. Infinity is infinity comes to know itself through each individual finite life. And it learns vastly different things from one perspective to the next, because nobody's reality is the same. Everybody's is completely different, even for those people who are involved in almost the exact same environment and the exact same scenarios. It all comes down to our focus and our thoughts and our beliefs and all of these things that shape what we give attention to. This reduction of importance shouldn't be taken as nihilism, or there's no need to become nihilistic. It doesn't matter, because it does matter in this material realm. It matters in this life, in your life. You matter in your life. You are the main character in your life. And that is what makes it important. When we can see that our life is insignificant, but then also sacred at the same time, we like free ourselves from all of the striving for some sort of validation, these trivial type egoic structures of the mind, and we can open ourselves up to this grace of participation of being. And that, it almost makes all that stuff not important, but it's something you have to go through. No infant is going to become ultimately aware. No 5-year-old child is going to be aware of this greater awareness, this oneness, this unity. They can't even fathom it yet. They barely can fathom what's going on in their direct vicinity. It's this process of growth that we go through in life that leads us to this ultimate knowing of all is one, all is connected. And we're playing a small, tiny little role in that big old picture, this big movie. Although it doesn't matter, that's what makes it beautiful. Like, what I do doesn't really matter. Any mistakes I make don't matter. Any great things I accomplish, they don't really matter. But they matter to me. And that's all that matters. It's what matters to me. And the same with you. All that matters is what happens to you. And then as we deconstruct the self, we find that even what matters to us doesn't matter to us. It matters because we are expressing beingness. And in this state is where we can live fully, we can love unconditionally, we can create consciously. Not because it is important, but because it is this natural process of being. And in that state of mind, nothing is important, but all things have importance. All right, so I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments about this, or would like any clarifications, just leave them down in the comments. And hope to see you guys back in the next video. Thanks for watching.